Namaste, good morning, vanakkam, whichever way you want to say it, just say it and feel it. And therefore, welcome back once again to another episode of Dekho Apna Desh. And today we are on our 94th webinar, viewers. And we, of course, are getting now very, very confused. The was 90s, so it could be the 95th. Don't kill us for that. But today, where are we going to take you? I'm sitting, of course, right now in sultry, balmy, very difficult weather in Delhi. But we're going to therefore take our travels today to a place which has an absolutely amazing weather. And that's a beautiful little place just down from Bangalore. I think it's about 120 or 130 odd kilometers. But of course, the specialist will tell you a little more about that because I'm only remembering that from my journey down there 31 years back. So I'm sure a lot has changed. But then a lot has not changed. And that's the beauty of our country. That's the beauty of our incredible India. There is so much that has not changed. We are a country which goes back to built heritage, which itself can be found thousands of years back. There is Thola Veera, which recently got designated as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. There is Lothal. And so there are so many places. But then we are also a country where our today's guest speaker is from Bangalore, which drives the Silicon Valley, which drives the technology solutions all across the world, not just for India. But that's the beauty of India. We managed to live with our past, and yet we are marching ahead, moving ahead, and being pioneers in technology and pioneers in so many other things. So it's going to be an interesting journey, I'm sure, as we go to this very, very beautiful place, Mysore. The palace is something to really, really, you just stand in awe over there. But then there's so much more to it. There's so much more to it, which is what today Vinay Parmeshwarappa is going to take us to. Now, that's another interesting tale, and I hope, Vinay, you're going to spend some time telling us about that. The journey of Vinay from being a techie, everybody down south must be at least an engineer, and then you start. So this is my basic education done. Now I'm going to do something else. So I think something like that seems to have happened with Vinay, where he found his calling, so to say, through travels, and that also getting inspired, as he just told me before the session, from being in Singapore, a tiny dot and 740, 750 odd square kilometers of a country, which also so much of it is part of reclaimed land. And here are we with the 4 lakh plus heritage monuments and temples and history being there. There are a number of languages, dialects, foods, and whatnot. And we are spoiled for choice. And that's where I think, as Vinay was telling me, he's the wonderment kind of started that why are we not showcasing so much more about India? And so here he is, and he's going to help us to hop onto a flight from wherever you are, land yourself in Bangalore. No, you can actually land in Mysore too. So you can do that, or if you want to do a car journey, you can go to Bangalore, do a lot of things to drive to these very, very beautiful parts of our country. So Vinay, I'm going to call you on the web stage, and I hope that we are all going to do physical travels to the beautiful part of our country in times to come. Vinay, the stage is all yours.
Thank you very much, Ms. Brar. I must say thank you for this opportunity. And this is a fantastic initiative by the ministry to showcase our country digitally, right, for the last year and a half. So thank you very much. And like you rightly said, India lives in the past, present, and the future, right? And if I look at the twin cities of Bangalore and Mysore, this is exactly what you would experience, the past, present, and the future, right? So here we are looking at this journey, what I call from Mysuru to Mysore, right? This is the story of one of my favorite cities, Mysore. But as we get going, I'm excited with this Dekho Apna Desh campaign. And I'm curious, I would love to ask my audience, like you said, take a flight and come into Mysore. I would love to know where are they taking their flights from. So I would love to hear from the audience on chat. Please tell me, where are you signing in from, right? Which part of the country, which part of the world, where you were signing in from. I would love to hear where our audience are today, right? Because I do know some of them from Mysore wanted to come in, some of them from Bangalore. Udupi, nice, famous for its food. Sureka, hello, is a good old friend from Delhi. Bindur from Bangalore, of course, lovely. Shimoga, okay, lovely, great. So we're really seeing Bangalore as well. Okay, lovely, lovely, lovely. So we're getting a good representation. Dubai, hello. Naveen, London, okay. So we've truly gone into
there's somebody who woke up in London to watch this show. Thank you for
I
that.
know. I know. Oh, lovely, lovely. California as well. Ricky, hello. Okay, great. So we do have interest for Mysore, not just from across the country, but I'm so glad from other parts of the world as well. Darjeeling. Okay, lovely. Thank you so much, guys from Canada. Thank you so much. Great. So as we get started on our journey into Mysore, here you go. I share my screen, and this is what we call from Mysuru to Mysore. Keep those responses coming, because as we get on this journey, I would love to pick your brains on a bunch of questions. So great. So when I see people from around the country and the world joining in today for this lovely story of Mysore, from Mysuru to Mysore, I have a little question for the audience, right? So when I think of Mysore, right, or I'd say when you all think of Mysore, what's the word that comes to your mind when you say Mysore, right? Is it something to do with food? There you go, Mysore Park, right? Because every city that we think of, there's a certain emotion attached, right? Palaces, yes. Chamundi Hills, yes. I'm just really curious to hear the word Mysore. What does it evoke in you? Temple, yes. Soap, the Mysore sandal soap, of course. I still use it every day. It's one of my favorites. Tippu Sultan, interesting, lovely. Anything more? Garden, of course, the KRS Gardens, and the silk. Great. You're really capturing the emotions of the city, right? Lovely. KRS. Thank you for letting me know what Mysore means to you, right? In terms of an emotion. So here we go. As we start on this journey, I have 3 quick questions, and each of these 3 are dates, right? But I promise you, there are no more dates in this presentation. Just these dates to indulge you, right? And I throw it open to our audience here. 1776, right? Can you think of any historical event that's happened not just in India but around the world? Because I also know we have friends coming in from California, something that they relate to exactly. The US independence, right? Great, well done, right? So that's the first date, 1776, done. Let's move on. Another one, right? 1789 to 1799, a 10-year period. Again, I'm just talking about events from around the world. This time, if you want to think Europe, I know we have somebody from London, anybody from France. If you look at the 10-year period in the French history, quite a turmoil there. That was the French Revolution, right? That was the French Revolution, exactly. 10-year period of French Revolution. Great. My last one, I promise you no more dates after this. 1815, this is again in Europe. We're talking about one of the most famous battles ever fought in Europe, right? Between the French and the English, right? In 1815, in Europe, exactly, it's Waterloo, right? That's what Swastik says, exactly. The Battle of Waterloo. So here, friends, if I tell you all these 3 global events, right? The American War of Independence, the French Revolution, and the Battle of Waterloo, all of them connect back to our city, our lovely city of Mysore. Would you believe me? Well, I will share the story of this connection, what I call a connected word, right? So where does that story begin from? Let's go back 200 years. This is the 1700s, right? The 1700s, on the map, you're seeing what was then the Kingdom of Mysore, right? The Kingdom of Mysore is ruled by these 2 gentlemen, Hyder Ali and Tippu Sultan, right? Brave kings who fought a lot of spirited battles against the British. In fact, 4 great wars were fought in Mysore against the British, very famously called the Anglo-Mysorean Wars, right? But let's look at what's happening around the world at that point in time. This is again the second half of the 1700s. This is Bengal. There's a massive famine that's hit Bengal, and millions of people are dying, right? In the famine. And the English East India Company that's in charge of India doesn't know what to do. They keep increasing taxes in Bengal. There's no solution there. So they come up with this idea. What's their idea? They make a plea to the English Parliament saying that, this tea that we bring from India into London, and then you guys in England sell it to different parts of the world, can we do it instead? The Parliament says yes. The Tea Acts are passed, and hence the East India Company goes on to directly sell tea from India and China into the rest of the world. Rest of the world here, I mean America, a big market, right? And what does the East India Company do? They start raising tax on tea. The Americans don't like it. So what do? In the second half of the 1700s, the Americans revolt against the British. It's the first time you're seeing the Americans revolt against the mighty empire. And in this act in Boston, right, they throw some tea off the coast. Very famously, any guesses? What is the event called? Right? We all have come across this exactly, the Boston Tea Party, right? That was an act of rebellion by the Americans against the empire by throwing tea off the coast. And the little known fact, that tea was Indian tea, right? And why do I talk about it here? Because you all realize it is a connected word, because when the Americans are fighting the British, here, Hyder and Tippu are fighting the English as well. So that's when you'd see George Washington, the first American president who was leading the American forces, was very much in touch with our Indian kings, both Hyder and Tippu. In fact, they say your enemy's enemy is your good friend. In fact, when George Washington defeated the British, he would raise a toast. He would raise 13 toasts to celebrate his victory on the 13 colonies. And one of those toasts was raised, any guesses in whose name? It was Hyder. Right? This was a party he was having in a church in New Jersey, and one of the toasts was raised in the name of Hyder Ali. Right? Not just that, the American forces even had a ship named Hyder Ali. I'm talking about in the 1700s, right? You're seeing how connected the word was, right? How the American rebels, the so-called rebels, revolutionaries back then, were very much in touch with the Indian kings. Why? Because of fighting a common enemy, the British, right? And it is here in America, when George Washington defeats the British army, it is him, it's Lord Cornwallis who's leading the British army who's defeated. Lord Cornwallis is sent back to England. Any guesses where his next posting was? Yeah? Well, that was here in India. So Lord Cornwallis, having lost America, comes to India. Here, he looks at the father-son duo. They won two great wars against the British. The Indians have won these wars, the First and the Second Anglo-Mysorian War. Cornwallis thinks it's a great chance for me to regain my lost glory. So he would waste no time. He would wage the third war against Hyder and Tippu. And in this war, Tippu is defeated. In fact, they take away half his kingdom. They ask him to pay a huge sum in terms of royalty, and they take two of his sons as hostages. The war becomes personal now, right? In fact, the British think they've cut Tippu to size, right? But that isn't the case. Tippu has already sent his emissaries to Europe, right? And here, there's another famous European general, Lord Napoleon Bonaparte. He has his eyes on India. Again, your enemy's enemy is your friend, right? The French are fighting the British in Europe. Hyder and Tippu are fighting British in India. So Napoleon decides to come and help Tippu. He comes all the way to Egypt. His plan is to take his ships and go across to India. But the British burn his ships, and thanks to the French Revolution, Napoleon is unable to come to India. He goes back to France to fight the revolution. But who eventually comes to India, comes to Mysore, is a young Englishman, no, in fact, an Irishman called Arthur Wellesley. Who's Arthur Wellesley? Well, he comes into India, comes into Mysore in 1799, and he goes on to fight the last and the final battle against Tippu, the fourth and the final Anglo-Mysorian War. In this battle in 1799, Tippu is not just defeated, but also killed. Right? Also killed, and Arthur Wellesley goes on to become, after defeating Tippu, becomes the first commissioner of Mysore for 2 years. Who is this man? He's the same person. He's the same person who goes on, exactly, Duke of Wellington, like Mandar says. Arthur Wellesley is the same person who goes on to Europe in 1815, defeats Napoleon in the Battle of Waterloo. So I would like to believe, friends, that whatever it took to defeat Napoleon was learned here in our backyard here in Mysore, right? So now you see how seemingly unrelated events, be it the American War of Independence, the French Revolution, or the Battle of Waterloo, all of them connect back to our backyard in Mysore. The ifs and buts of history, right? Think of it for a moment, right? What if the British were victorious in America, right? Not India. America would be the crown in the British Empire. What if the French were victorious in India? What if Napoleon was successful in coming to India? Just think of it for a moment. Think of our food, Indian food mixed with French cuisine, masala, creme brulee, ifs and buts of history, right? But the story doesn't just end here, right? After the war in 1799, when Tippu was defeated and killed, what you see in the island of Srirangapatna, which was his capital, right, was a great ruckus. The British have fought wars around the world. One of their the most coveted war halls was found in this island, in this tiny island of Srirangapatna. Nowhere else they found so much wealth. And you could see all of these are found in the museums of England. So this is the bird of paradise, which is on Tippu's throne. This was taken away to London. In fact, there was so much mayhem in the island of Srirangapatna after the battle. For all the wealth out there, the British had to kill their own soldiers. They had to hang their own soldiers just to bring some discipline in their army. All the wealth was bought out. It was divided based on your rank. If you're a colonel, you got so much. If you're a major, you got so much. If you're a general, you got so much. And a lot of it also went to the British crown, right? They were left with this exquisite piece of furniture, I would say. Tippu's famous tiger-headed golden throne. They didn't know what to do. It was too big. So they broke it up into pieces and it was distributed as war booties. In fact, the tiger heads were an absolute, coveted prize. We've lost a lot of them. In fact, the biggest, even today, can be found in the Windsor Castle in just outside of London. One of them is in the Powys Castle in Wales. One of them was just auctioned. It was in a private collection about 10 years ago for a few $1 million, right? So now you know how a lot of the wealth from here you would find in museums of London. In fact, if you go to the Victoria and Albert Museum, you have a section called the Srirangapatna jewels, right? All the wealth taken away. Not just that, if you go to the V&A, you'd also see this. What is this? This is an exhibit called the Tippu's Tiger. This is the toy, the Tippu commission, right? This is a tiger attacking an English soldier. And it was a fascinating toy because it was a winding toy. Once you wound, you could see the handle there. Once you wound the tiger, you could hear the tiger roar and the soldier cry in pain. And Tippu just loved it. Just think of the sight. Tippu watching his kids play as they wound the tiger and you heard all these noises. After the war, this was taken as a symbol for the British victory here, sent away. So even today, you could find this in the Victoria and Albert Museum as a very proud display, right? Not just that. If you go to NASA's facility in America in Florida, as soon as you enter the lobby, you'd see a painting of the War of Srirangapatna. I'm wondering, and let me ask you all, right? You could comment on chat. Why would NASA have a painting of a war fought in our subcontinent? Is there anything that we have to offer to NASA? Any guesses? Any guesses? Interesting. Manda seems to know all the answers. Exactly. Mysore rockets. Exactly. If you look at the 4 wars that were fought here in Mysore against the British, the first 2 wars were won by Hyder and Tippu. And why were they won? One of the reasons was the use of rockets. Chinese are the first to invent rockets. Get this right? Chinese are the first. Don't get me wrong. Hyder and Tippu did not invent rockets, but they were the first to use rockets in warfare. In fact, they had 5,000 men in what is called the Rocket Brigade, right? Where this is nothing but a tin can filled with gunpowder with a long bamboo stick. Once fired, went about a mile or 2 and scared the cavalry. Tippu wasn't happy, so they moved the bamboo stick, put a sword. Now when you fired, it not only scared the cavalry, the swirling motion ended up killing a bunch of people. This was unheard of in warfare, right? So after the battle here in Srirangapatna, these rockets were taken to England. They were reverse engineered, and the same rockets were used against Napoleon and even in America. And these rockets today are known as Congreve rockets. Why? Because it was Thomas Congreve who was the person who took these rockets back to England and reverse engineered them, right? All these rockets used in warfare, it was all thanks to Hyder and Tippu. Not just that, these rockets have another association. When I said these rockets are used not just in Europe, but also in America. So when this American poet, Mr. Keats, I remember, John K. Keats, who wrote the American national anthem, he was inspired by these rockets, and that's how he penned down the American national anthem. And you have a line for the Mysore rockets here, and the rockets' red glare, the American national anthem, is a tribute to what we see as Mysore rockets, right? So now you're seeing how the whole world was once a village, right? So here we're talking about Mysore, a lovely city and all the global connections it has, from the little place. What you're seeing in front on your screens here is Srirangapatna. That was the island from where Hyder and Tippu ruled, and you would see these connections from around the world, right? But what happens after the war? After the war, in 1799, after Tippu was defeated and killed, the British hand the power back to the Wadiars, the royal family that's ruled Mysore for about 400 years in this region. So two things happened, right? One, the British, unable to take the mosquitoes in Srirangapatna because it's an island, decided to move their base. The cantonment moves to Bangalore and it becomes a British military base. And the royal family decides to move from Srirangapatna to Mysore, right? And all this happens in 1799. So you'd see how Srirangapatna now is not of prominence or not of prominence anymore. It's Bangalore, which is the cantonment, and Mysore, which becomes the home to the royal family. But for the first half of the 1800s, what you saw in Mysore was nothing much, right? When Tippu is finished, the king is about 4 years old and he's put on throne. For the next 50 years, what you see happening in Mysore is a lot of local riots. Nothing much to write home, right? Nothing much to write home. But towards the end of the 1800s, when this man, Krishnaraju Wadiyar IV, he comes to power, and that's when you see Mysore transform, right? After a busy, bloody, and a hectic 1700s, Mysore sees a lull in the 1800s, and at the turn of the century, thanks to this man, Krishnaraju Wadiyar, the new king, you'd see Mysore transform, right? And I'll talk about the transformation, but it's him and his good partner. Who's his good partner? Sir M. Visvesvaraya, one of the finest thinking minds of India in the 18th and 1900s, known for its engineering acumen, right? Who also becomes a diwan for this king. So this duo are really going to transform Mysore. When I say transform Mysore, what is it that they end up doing, right? So if you look at these two kings, there's a lot of focus on education, right? When I say a lot of focus on education, in fact, one of the earliest women's schools and colleges in the country was started here in Mysore, right? And here's a little picture that you're seeing of all the women back then in Mysore coming to school. And this is a picture from their music class. Not just one of the first schools for women, in fact, one of the earliest English medium schools that taught English was started in Mysore, right? So what you're seeing here is a lot of emphasis on education, right? Be it these schools, be it these colleges that really are taking shape, and it's thanks to the vision of the king here, right? Not just schools and colleges. In fact, what you'd also see is the first university among princely states. Delhi, Bombay, Calcutta, and Madras were presidencies. And what do I mean by presidencies? They were under the direct rule of the British, and they all had a university in place. But the 500 odd princely states, which were governed by royalty, did not have access to education, especially at the university level. So the first university among princely states in the whole of the country was started here in Mysore. And again, thanks to the Maharaja. In fact, his influence on education is not just limited to Mysore. He was the first chancellor of the Banaras Hindu University. Even today, if you go to the Banaras Hindu University, you'd see a hall named after Krishnaraju Wadiyar. So you'd really see the focus and the importance of education that you see in this region, right, in Mysore. What happens? Along with a lot of focus on education, you also see a lot of focus on industrialization. Like I said, Krishnaraja Warrior IV, along with his Diwan, Sir Vishweshwaraya, were really focused on making sure that industries, especially modern industries, have a presence in Mysore. We're really talking about the early 1900s here, right? Right from your Mysore sandal soap to your dams, to your banks, to your silk, to the sandal. You really look at, I think, the whole wide variety of impetus given to industries here in the erstwhile Mysore state, right? In fact, every Indian woman who loves collecting saris has a Mysore silk, right? Has a Mysore silk in their collection. I would love to ask, right, if there are women in this audience, do you possess a Mysore silk sari? And what is special about a Mysore silk sari as per you, right? Because most of the women that I've talked to says, Hema, I would love to hear from the women in the audience, right? What do you like about your Mysore silk saris? In India, we have Anupama says she has one as well. You have Kanchivaram, you have the Dharmavaram, you have the Banaras saris, but a lot of them, of course, down south do possess a Mysore silk sari. So I would love to hear. Any of you want to tell us on chat, what do you like about your Mysore silk saris? Light and weight, exactly. No, every time, right? I've asked the women about their collection and about the Mysore silk sari. This is the first thing that I hear. It's so light and I enjoy wearing it, right? And there's a secret to it, right? The Mysore silk sari has a distinction. Vibrant colors. It has a distinction. It's the words only 100% pure silk sari, right? There's only silk that's used. There's no other mixture, right? It's the words only 100% pure silk sari, and the border that you see, the zaris that you see, is silk thread coated with real gold and silver. It's a little known fact that until independence, the Mysore silk saris were available only for the royal family. It was only post-independence that you would see the production of the Mysore sari really flourish. Today, you could even come to Mysore and visit. You could visit the whole facility of the KSIC, Karnataka Karnataka State Industrial Corporation, where you really see the saris being made, and it's an absolute delight to watch these saris being made, right? And it also has a GI tag. What do I mean by GI tag? It's a geographical indication. For the sari only made from Mysore can be called a Mysore silk sari. In fact, another little known fact is Mysore, to its claim, has the highest number of GI tags anywhere in the country, right? So if you're in Mysore, I also really encourage you to just come and have a tour of the Mysore silk factory. It's open to anybody, and it's an absolute delight. It's a little known fact. About 20 years ago, this factory was on the verge of being shut down, right? But then the whole thing was revived. From having 3 shifts, they moved to having 1 shift, focused on their unique designs, their colors, trying to sell this online. And today, this is a highly profit-making unit, right? And it's completed more than 100 years, and this stands testimony for this whole journey that Mysore has seen with this industry, right? But what else do we see in Mysore outside of silk, right? What else do we see, right? Sandal. Something that I heard from the participants, especially early on, is how much they remember the Mysore sandal soap, right? Clearly unique. A lot of us use it even till today. Like I said, I'm a regular user. So what's the story with Mysore sandal soap in Mysore? Mysore, even till this day, produces the highest amount of sandalwood for the entire country. Almost 70% of sandalwood of India comes from Mysore. And the use of sandal goes back in time, right? Goes back not just a few 100 years, but a few centuries, right? And sandal from Mysore has always been exported, right? In the early days, it was exported to China. Why? Because sandal is used in medicine. Even today in Chinese medicine, you'd see sandal being used. Not just that. If you go to the Forbidden City, a lot of the furniture that you see in the Forbidden City is made out of sandal, right? Like I said, a lot of it was exported. In the 1900s, a lot of the sandalwood was exported to Europe. it was very, very popular in, especially during the nightlifes in Paris and London. Why? Because sandal extract was used as a cure for STDs, right? None of us even knew that that's how it could be used. But something happens, right? Something happens in the 1900s that export is hugely impacted. It's the World War. When World War I hits, the consumption of sandal in Europe is heavily impacted. So the king wonders, what do we do with this excess sandal that we have? And that's when, got it right, the idea of the Mysore sandal soap was born. Again, about 100 years ago. So take a look. This is a old poster, right? If you say Mysore sandal soap, if you can read, this says par excellence and all of it, right? Says the garment soap factory in Bangalore. People who enjoy using the Mysore sandal soap would agree with me that not much has changed with this soap, right? It's the same aroma that you get, and it's the old world charm of Mysore that's still going strong, right? Mysore sandal soap. I'd love to ask the audience, anybody here fans of the Mysore sandal soap? Yeah, this is what they've also introduced is newer versions of it with higher concentrates of the sandalwood oil. Yeah, and if you haven't tried it, I would say it's a must. Surekha says she's a fan. I kid you not, when I was traveling in Himachal a good 15 years ago, and the moment our host there got to know that I'm from Mysore, his only request was Chandan Sabun, right? That's how it's known in the north of the country, that I would love to receive a package of Chandan Sabun from you, right? So, like Shobha says, the whole family, exactly, right? There's something about the Mysore sandal soap and the nostalgia it evokes. And I've talked about this to so many people. For some of them, it reminds them of their grandmothers because that's the soap that they used. To some of them, it's a tradition that they've carried forward, right? So the Mysore sandal soap. In fact, it's a little trivia. A few months ago, I had this lovely lady on our walking tour in Bangalore, and she told me that her great grandfather was called Soap Shastri, and that caught a lot of my curiosity. I said, what do you mean? He worked under the king. So when the king had this idea of making the soap, he sent him, Mr. Shastri, to London to pick up the technical knowledge of making the soap, and he came back and he was instrumental in setting up the soap factory. And even today, if you go on Google and just type in Soap Shastri, you would find details of Mr. Shastri and the Mysore sandal soap. So it's great to see the family even today lives in Bangalore and very proud of their ancestors' contribution, right? Mr. Soap Shastri and Mysore sandal soap. Moving on, what you see here is an electric pole, right? If I tell you the first street light in whole of not just India, but the whole of Asia was here in Bangalore. And the erstwhile Mysore state was the first place in the whole of the continent, the whole of Asia, to produce electricity. I'm curious, and I ask you all that question. Why do you think it was the erstwhile Mysore state to get electricity for the first time in Asia? Why not Shanghai? Why not Beijing? Why not Bombay? Why not Delhi? Interesting. Pramuk there says KGF, right? You're right. The answer here lies in KGF. What does KGF stand for? People down south, we call it KGF. The rest of the country know it as Kola. KGF is Kola gold mines. At the turn of the 1800s, gold was discovered in Kolar. When I say gold was discovered in Kolar, in fact, it was the largest deposit of gold on the entire planet at that point in time. Even today, it is the second deepest gold mine in the whole world after the gold mines in South Africa, right? So when gold was discovered here, they had to find a way to get this gold out, right? So what did they do? This is what they did, right? The king sent his best engineers in the 1800s to Niagara. Why Niagara? Because Niagara was the first place on the planet to produce electricity using water. They studied the technology there in the 1890s. They came back to Mysore and they decided to set up what was the first hydroelectric project in Asia. They got the generator, a General Electric, the whole generator and the turbine unit from London. It came by ship to the port in Mangalore. On elephant backs, it was taken to this place called Shivanasamudra, where it was installed. Just imagine this for a moment, right? More than 120 years ago, this electric turbine generator is put on elephant backs because you had no railroads back then, and taken to this place on the banks of River Kaveri. And that's how they produce electricity for the first time in Asia. And the first transmission line from Shivanasamudra goes all the way to the gold mines, exactly, to take the gold of the gold mines. And from there, the first city to have its street lights was Bangalore, Pramukh said, exactly, it's around the turn of the century. In fact, the first street light in Bangalore, Bangaloreans can relate to it, was near Kiar Market, right? That's in the heart of the old city. And you also saw electricity come to Mysore, right? If one thing that all of us remember from a visit to Mysore is the grandly lit Mysore Palace. There are more than 97,000 light bulbs adorned on this majestic palace, right? And I've always wondered, this is a question that I've always asked myself, being an electrical engineer by qualification, why is it that the Mysore Palace is filled with light bulbs on the exterior? I haven't come across any other structure anywhere else in the world that has light bulbs all across this facade, right? Anybody else, I would love to hear if you come across. Harrods in London, I see, but yeah, not the same. And I always wonder, and this is my take, I haven't come across this in any historical document, but this is my take, leading tours on Mysore for the last 12 years. I believe this was a way that the king was making a statement to the rest of the world. We were the first to produce electricity in the whole of Asia, and here's my home, brightly lit home. And back then, the Mysore Palace was lit every evening, right? Every evening. And today you see that spectacle once a week on Sundays and during national holidays, right? So you're seeing how this whole use of technology and how electricity really changed the game. So what you saw was, with electricity coming in, like I said, with the focus on education, there was a lot of good work the kings did as well. When Swami Vivekananda wanted to go to Chicago for his famous speech that we all remember him today in the first International Religion Congress, he traveled the length and breadth of the country raising funds. And one of them who gave a generous donation was the then king of Mysore, right? Chamraja Wadiyar. So when Swami Vivekananda was traveling to Chicago by ship for his great speech, on the same ship was Jamshedji Tata, the famous industrialist who was going to Japan on business. On their conversation, Swami Vivekananda impressed upon him the importance of starting an institute of technical repute. Tata, clearly taken in by the idea, would come back to India and look for land. And that's when, in the 1900s, the Maharaja of Mysore invites Jamshedji Tata to Bangalore and gifts him, free of cost, when I say gifts him, 400 acres of land in the heart of Bangalore. And that's how Tata Institute, or what we know as Indian Institute of Sciences, was set up. Today, Indian Institute of Sciences is one of Asia's leading centers in science and technology for all the research that they've done, right? Including Sir C.V. Raman, the Nobel laureate, was based out of here. I'm also very proud that I went to school here for a couple of months. And I'm seeing the kind of contributions the erstwhile royal family really has made to this region, right? If you also see, is this mixture, right? For Bangalore to become the Silicon Valley of India and Asia, it was this potent combination of education combined with technology. If I have to draw a parallel, if you look at which is the Silicon Valley of the world, it's California. And what changed California? Very similar story. It was gold. Found in the 1850s, the whole Californian gold rush. which attracted a lot of entrepreneurial-minded people. That with access to great education, be it Stanford or Berkeley, really spearheaded California as the Silicon Valley of the world. And it's the same story here. In this part of the world, it was gold and kolar combined with access to great education, and you see the flourishing of another tech hub. I always say the one thing that California got, and we in the erstwhile Mysore state did not, because the gold rush. Any guesses what that is, my friends? The one thing that Californians are very proud of, that we all use day in and day out, even today, right? Something that we wear, something which is very rugged, which is made for the gold mine workers in California in the 1800s, was the Levi's jeans, right? The Levi's jeans was made for the mine workers in California. That was the one thing that we in Bangalore did not get because of the gold rush, but pretty much the story is the same. But moving on, I'm talking about the illustrious contribution of this Maharaja, Krishnaraja Wadiyar. Like I said, in terms of education, in terms of industrialization and technology, really went on to have his mark. In fact, he ended up making a lot of wealth as well. In the 1930s and 1936, he decided to make a trip to England, and it was a fascinating journey. The Maharaja traveled with his entire entourage, also with the statue of goddess Chamundeshwari, because he was a religious man, and with water from the river Ganga. And when he would enter England, he was the richest man ever to set foot in England. His personal wealth, back in the day, if you calculate for time, he was worth about $80 billion back in today's valuation. He was the richest man ever to set foot in England, so much so that they would even rename one of those trains that day as the Mysore Express, because he was an exotic Indian Maharaja coming in style to England, where he would stay in this hotel called Dorchester, where one room was reserved just for his goddess, the statue of the goddess. He was a religious Indian king coming into London in style, so much so that every time this Maharaja bought Rolls Royce, he bought not one or not two, he bought them in batches of 7. So even today, Rolls Royce has a little line as a tribute to the Maharaja. It's called doing a Mysore. If you're wondering what doing a Mysore is placing a large order of Rolls Royce in one go. And again, all goes back to thanks to the Maharaja. So if any of you have the kind of money, you could definitely do a Mysore, right? But tell me, friends, as we talk about the history of our city, Mysore, we've only talked about kings, men. Haven't the women had a role to play, especially when we talk about history? Why is our history so skewed towards men? And this is where Mysore takes a deviation. In fact, on 2 instances at the turn of the century, when Tippu was killed and when a 4-year-old king was installed on the throne, it was the queen regent back in the day who really took the call. And it was the same thing in the 1800s when the famous Krishnaraja Wadiyar was still a young boy in his teens when his father passed away. It was this lady, Vani Vilasa, who really took control of the kingdom and who really ran it, right? It's a little known fact in history. In fact, the most famous palace, one of the most famous palaces in the country, was built under her supervision, because the previous palace was burnt in a fire during her daughter's wedding. It was she who imagined and built the palace that we see today as the Mysore Palace. It was not a king, it was a queen who built one of the most fascinating palaces of our country. Not just that, the Mysore royal family was not just involved in pomp and glory. You really see their contribution towards the state when KRS Dam was being built in 1900s, right? One of its largest undertaking back in the day, not just in India, but in the world. When the royal family fell short of funds, the queen would go and pledge her personal jewels in Bombay to raise funds to finish the project. That's the kind of contribution that you would see of the Mysore royal family in the development of Mysore. In fact, about a decade ago, the main street of Mysore, which is called Vani Vilasa Road, for more than a century, was being renamed as Mahatma Gandhi Road, right? Every city in India has a little tribute to Mahatma Gandhi, but Mysoreans came out and protest. They protested that the name shouldn't be changed because her contribution to Mysore is greater than anybody else's contribution to the city. Finally, there was a truce that was reached upon. So today, half the road is still retained after her. It's called the Vani Vilasa Road, and the other half is named after Mahatma Gandhi. So it's called the MG Road. So that's the contribution of women in Mysore. The strong women of Mysore is what I say. But friends, as we talk about the technical progress of Mysore, don't get me wrong. Hasn't Mysore retained and held on to its culture? Of course, and very strongly so, right? In fact, today, it's considered the word capital of Ashtanga Yoga, right? From Madonna to Gwyneth Paltrow to Bono, from the who's who in the world who are interested to learn yoga, come to teachers in Mysore. And again, this goes back to royalty as well, right? When Krishna Rajawari, the king, was having his personal having physical ailments, it was yoga that cured him. And his yoga teacher was Krishnamacharya. And his students were two great disciples. One is B.K. Iyengar, who eventually went and set up his place in Pune, and the other, Pattabi Joy, who remained in Mysore. In fact, the picture you're seeing on the right is the Sanskrit Padashala, where Krishnamacharya was a teacher, so was B.K. Iyengar, and so was Pattabi Joy. So you see, even today, you're seeing a strong connection to yoga in Mysore. Come the months of September to March, parts of Mysore is transformed, and you'd see yoga students from around the world just coming to learn yoga. In fact, it's also called the Mysore style of yoga, extremely popular. That's yoga. What else is Mysore held on to? Really known for its art. What you're seeing here is a display of inlay art. Mysore has the world's largest cluster of inlay art. What is inlay art? It's wood inlaid, and what you see is an embossed. What you see in Taj Mahal is the same form, but it's done with stone. Here it's the same art form, but done with wood inlay. Back then, it was sandalwood inlaid with ivory. Today, of course, you can't use ivory, you can't use sandalwood, but you're seeing rosewood and a lot of use of different material, right? In terms of inlay art. As you move on in terms of what is Mysore's contribution culturally, not just inlay art, Mysore also has its own form of painting, is the Mysore style of painting. Just like Tanjore in Mysore as well, this is the style of painting. I use gold leaf foils to come up with art. Some of the largest collection of Mysore style art in the entire world is in private collections here in Mysore, and that's another contribution of Mysore into the field of art. And not just inlay art and Mysore style painting, you also have stone sculptors. Some of the most famous stone sculptors are based out of Mysore. The gentleman you're seeing here is a sixth generation stone sculptor. His father has won the national award, and you'd see his family, how they've done 60 plus idols for the Mysore royal family. And it's a culture they still keep forward, right? All this is on the culture of Mysore. But friends, can we talk about Mysore and not talk about food? Right? Exactly. In fact, this is a story here as well. About a century ago, one of the royal chefs in the kitchen, right, to impress the king, came up with a dish which is a mix of besan and sugar and jaggery and a bunch of other items. And when presented to the king, which the king really enjoyed, and that was a dish which is named Mysore Pak, right? Something that we've all enjoyed at different points in our time. Even today, you would see the great grandson of the very same chef, who was called Kakasura Madappa, still selling Mysore Pak in Mysore. There's a little name corner sweet shop called Guru Sweets. So if you're ever in Mysore and you want to taste not just the sweet, but it's a taste from a slice of history, please do visit the Guru Sweets. It is run by three brothers, even today, religiously in a small shop, and it's a roaring business. And they also have a way of doing business. The youngest comes first at 6:30 in the morning, open shops. The one in the middle comes in the afternoon, keeps an eye on the shop, and the oldest comes in the evening. So every evening, it's still the brothers in the third generation keeping an eye on the shop, right? And also, when you're talking about Mysore, you can never miss the famous dosa, the Mysore masala dosa. We all have our favorite forms of dosa. The Mysore masala dosa, especially with its mix of red chutney, is a delicacy, right? And Mysore is known for its food. So if you're ever in Mysore, never miss the Mysore masala dosa. Not just in Mysore, every time I've traveled and I've looked at a good South Indian restaurant, they always have a Mysore masala dosa, and everybody has its own interpretation to it. Last but not the least, something else that you can never go wrong in this part of the world is coffee. Again, Mysore filter coffee, as it's known. It's a test for a true blood South Indian. You wash off your great masala dosa with a fine cup of filter coffee, right? There are a lot of proponents of filter coffee. So am I. I can never start my day without a cup of filter coffee. So here, what you see on your screen is an image of Dasara. And what is Dasara? Dasara is a 400-year-old living tradition. It's a living tradition of the celebration of Mysore, right? And even today, in the months of September, October, or November, you'll see the city transform over 10 days with a lot of festivities. You'll see a lot of activities come to the forefront. And on the final day, you'll see a grand procession. And every evening for those 10 days, the entire city is lit, almost like a lady getting dressed for like a bride in a wedding. It's a great time to come visit the city, right? So Mysore Dasara is a celebration of the city for all the different contributions it's made. The Mysore Dasara. I would leave you with what Mahatma Gandhi had to say on his visit to Mysore in the 1930s. And we looked at the king here, and he said, when most kings are busy off to Europe or busy with their women or their wine, and here was one king who truly stood for his people. Right? That was Krishnaraj Wadiyar. He even gave him a title called Raja Rishi. Right? Even the British in the 1930s said, of all our dominions, the most progressive and the most prosperous is the erstwhile Mysore state. Right? So that's the kind of mark that Mysore has made. And today we're seeing the same being carried forward, be it with technology here in Bangalore or with all the cultural aspects here in Mysore, right? With that, I come to an end of the story of one of my favorite cities, Mysore, right? And let me stop sharing my screen, and I will open it up to anybody if you have any questions on Mysore, right? So I'm getting participants. If you have any questions on Mysore, thanks Biswaranjan, thanks Anupama. What about Vrindavan Gardens? Of course, if you're in Mysore, sorry, my bad, I missed out Vrindavan Gardens. Exactly. In fact, if you're ever in Mysore, that's a must visit. The Vrindavan Gardens are modeled after the famous Mughal gardens in Kashmir, and even today it's a treat to your eyes. A lot of famous Bollywood movies in the 60s and 70s, from Podosan to the names go on, were all shot in these lovely locations in the gardens, right? In the Kiara's gardens, right? Thank you. I'm seeing a lot of you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you very much. But I'd love to take on questions. If any of you have anything that I can, I'll try and attempt on Mysore, right? I'm seeing a few. There's a question on if Vani Vilasa built the Mysore Palace. Where was Tippu's palace? That was a very, very good question. It's a little known fact that the present palace of Mysore that you see is not the first palace. In fact, the first palace was struck down in a lightning, after which there was a stone palace that was built, that was brought down when you had the invading powers, Hyder and Tippu, come in. After the second palace was destroyed, the third palace was built, which is a wooden palace, that was burned down in a fire. So what you're seeing today is the fourth palace. Hyder and Tippu had the capital in Srirangapatna, right? So the palace is Srirangapatna. They did have a palace in Mysore as well. That was in Nazarbad, so not in the same locality. So that's the Tippu's palace. Surika is talking about the heritage buildings of Mysore. It's an absolute treat, whether it's the DC office, whether it's the university buildings, whether it's the good old heritage structures of Mysore. It's always a treat. Definitely, there are almost 200 heritage monuments that come under the guidelines, right? So that's with the heritage buildings. How
So
does Tippu Sultan?
there's a
Sorry.
question, Vinay, on if you could visit the silk weaving factories.
Yes, definitely, Ms. Bad. You could visit the silk weaving factory. It's open to public. Just for COVID, I think there are restrictions. It's open to public, and it's a great visit. Um,
Also, I remember
as I
doing
think,
a session with the NIFT guys. They have their workshop there where they did the Chennapatna toys, and that was a fascinating session. And for viewers, you could go there. You can go to those workshops too and see how these beautiful Chennapatna toys are made, and also the inlay work that happens over there. So that's another fascinating. There's just so much, I guess. And
yes,
how many days are you recommending to everyone? At least kind of sort of block for Mysore?
I would say one should come and live here, Mrs. Brad, to experience the city.
That would be fascinating.
Because
But the problem is,
Mysore is a city that.
yeah, but that's our problem. Whenever we go to any city in India, we are like, oh, I want to live here. I want to live here. So it's going to getting hard making so many houses.
That's a very good question on Mysore. I would say definitely a few days, 3-4 days, because not just Mysore, you're also going to experience Srirangapatna and then the neighboring forest, the Kabani and Nagaroli. You can also go into Coop. So it really becomes a base for you to come in and spend some
So
time.
kind of a 10-day tour would be a good idea for this whole sector,
A
I guess.
week, 10 days is a great time for
Mm,
this region, right? It's a very good time for the
mm,
region.
mm, mm. And I think in terms of the stay options, also there are all budget options, right?
Yes, definitely. In fact, we have some palace hotels. There are a lot of budget options, and in fact, it's also voted as one of the cleanest cities in the country. Right.
Mm,
In fact, our railway station is still the cleanest railway station in the country. There's a beautiful rail museum that's come next door. So
mm,
there's a lot to offer. Like I said, it could be in terms of history and architecture with the palaces,
mm,
wildlife. You have the famous Ranganthittu bird sanctuary just outside the city, Kabani and Bandipur. In terms
mm,
of food,
mm.
and if you like I said, textiles and art and artisans, there's a lot that a tourist can indulge
Hmm.
themselves.
Manish is mentioning about the Ayurveda and wellness centers. Yeah, yeah, are one of the best, he says. Yes. So that's another huge, I think, pull factor for any place, because half the things that you want to do in a holiday is to travel, see a lot of things, but at the end of the day, you also want to take care of your tired feet. So I think it's a great idea to combine that. Wonderful.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
it's been a great session, and I'm sure what we want to do through each of our sessions is to just about whet that appetite in everyone, that hey, I really want to go here. And from the kind of responses one is getting, I'm sure all of you have got that urge that as and when you actually begin your travels. The good part, of course, is domestic travel is picking up, has picked up more in some parts than in the others. But yes, of course, the guidelines still keep coming. The advertisements still do remind you to keep wearing your mask, go get your vaccinations done, and definitely do not take chances, because we do need to go over the hump, so to say, of the fear of a third wave, because it all has to be gradual, and you don't want to do 2 steps ahead and 3 steps back kind of a situation. So it is important for all of us to respect the protocols, to not just respect it because the government says so or the doctors are saying so, but because it's your health here that we are talking about. So do keep yourself safe, do keep the distance, but do start making your itineraries, and do not forget to put Mysuru right up there in one of your top 5 places, maybe. I would do that. I would do that. I think it is one of the most fascinating journeys that one can possibly take in India. And we have, had a wonderful session, Vinay. It's actually taken us into very different aspects. And I also must congratulate you in the way that you ran the session. You really got people engaged in saying where are they from and their thoughts. And one thing that kind of comes into their mind when they think of Mysuru, it's been a really, really engaging session. But before I tell the viewers as to where are we going to take you next time, I'm going to ask Vinay to come in once again and say a few last things before we, say our thanks to him. And I tell you where are we going next week.
Thank you, Ms. Brar. Like I said, it's a fantastic initiative by the ministry to showcase our country digitally. An absolute pleasure having had the opportunity to present Mysore to you all. And I look forward to joining you in this journey as to which is your destination next.
Right. So next time when you guys do plan a trip to Mysore, you know who to call up for giving you a truly, truly beautifully done and beautifully curated tour. So look up Vinay. The webinars and the sessions, viewers, remain on the ministry's website as a recorded repository. They are part of India's digital learning too. So you'll find it on YouTube. And therefore, whenever you actually want to travel, do go back into the index that we have created for all of you, these amazing webinars, and spend that 45-50 minutes into the session and see, and then make your list of to-do things. It's virtually like a Lonely Planet for you, because you just have to go into this audiovisual chapter instead of reading a book and plan your tours and travels. And I'm repeating it for everybody's benefit that it remains as a recorded repository on the Ministry of Tourism's website under the banner of Dekho Apna Desh. You can't miss it. And if you do have a problem finding anything, we are always there for you. Our coordinates are very much available on the ministry's website. Again, reach us, let us know, but also reach us if you want to showcase something. We've had some wonderful sessions done by people who are not even professionally, so to say, attached with the sector of tourism. It's just their sheer love for their country. It's something that they've kind of spent time on, and they've come on board, crafted some pictures, family pictures, and made it really interesting for viewers to have a look at. So if you have any ideas on what you want to showcase, something around the corner, something in the nook, in the cranny of part of the country where you live in, please come ahead and share your view and your vignettes of Incredible India. But next time, which is the 28th of August, we are going to take you, as we always do, zoom, back up, north, very, very north. We're going to take you to Ladakh. And if you think that Pangong Lake is the only place to go to, you are so very mistaken. We are going to take you to some very different places in Ladakh. You're going to go with us to Nubra. No, I'm not telling you anything more, because I want you to log in 28th of August, 11 a.m., same time. In the meantime, keep wearing your mask, keep safe, keep that duri, 6 gaz ki, and take your vaccinations if you haven't taken them, and keep watching with us our beautiful, incredible India. Dekho aur dikhao apna sundar atulya Bharat. Thank you, Vinay. Thank you, Team NEGD. And thank you, viewers, for supporting us through our initiative. Namaste.